Hey, I'm Drew, and you're listening to the Citizen Coder Podcast. In this extra long episode, I interview Byron Salty, VP of Video and Devices at Warner Media. We talk about Elixir, Dockyard Academy, mentorship, skill development. We record a part 2, and so much more. Let's dive in. Hey, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hey, this is Byron. You can find me everywhere. I'm Byron Salty on Twitter and Medium and all those kind of places. But so Byron Salty here. You've caught me at a really interesting time, Drew, because I'm about to have a pivot in my career, and I just next week will be leaving the company that I know as Turner Broadcasting, and you may have heard of it as Warner Brothers Discovery, after 22 years. So I started there in college, and now I'm about to embark on new things for me. But it was a really awesome place. Really loved a lot of things about it. You know, Turner Broadcasting, if you're not familiar, is sort of the home of CNN and Cartoon Network and
Mm,
TBS and TNT and a lot of household names, which is really cool.
yeah.
And we got to work with a bunch of large sporting brands as well, like the NBA and NASCAR and March Madness, PGA. So I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of really cool things over the years, and a lot of different areas as well, because I started in content management as a coder
Yep.
and moved into e-commerce, and that's when I made a move into management, and then like big data analytics, and
Mm-hmm.
most recently I've been running a department around video playback and doing things with like iOS, Android, Roku, and all that. But that was more in a leadership capacity. So I
Mm-hmm.
haven't, had hands-on keyboards professionally in a while,
Sure.
other than, you know, PowerPoint. But uh, that I do, I really like technology. That's where I came from. That's what I like to do, for fun in a way. So I still code all the time.
That's awesome. What languages and tech do you like to play with? I know, like, kind of, where we've been playing, but prior to that, what have you been playing with?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I know that you're making reference to you and I are connected on a endeavor to learn Elixir, which is a
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool place. But
Yeah. Well,
I got on this path, and I wanted to just start out with some positivity for you that. Um, I've been listening to the podcast. I'm really honored that you asked for me to be on. I listened to the last couple of episodes that you had, and the people that you have on here have been so amazing. I hope I can live up to that. But really good content. I really like your style of
oh,
just
that's
kind of
awesome.
talking to people, and being humble in a way, and being vulnerable, and just like, hey, I don't know what that is. Why don't you tell me about that? And vice versa. And I just have really enjoyed what I've experienced so far. So I'm really glad to be here and be a part of this.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's one thing I definitely I'll just like to have conversations and learn stuff, and I've learned a ton of stuff, and it's actually kind of if I hadn't started this podcast, I wouldn't have well I wouldn't have run into the Elixir boot camp that we're currently going through, and and hopefully a job route for me, because I haven't really had much in the way of a steady career. I've kind of been all over the place, mostly due to family and just circumstances and things of that nature. But I hadn't fallen into something that I really enjoyed, and um, you know, it's funny listening to people that have had long-term careers, and ones that, like, I don't know, you rarely find one people that have really enjoyed their careers. Like, you sound like you've had your hands in all kinds of pies, and it's probably been a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. I've been meeting with a lot of different. I was talking about the company name because there's been a lot of mergers and
Hmm.
acquisitions recently, and
Yeah.
been in a lot of meeting rooms with different people that are introducing themselves and where they come from, and it's usually a shock to people who are interacting with former Turner broadcast employees that are like, I was there for 22 years. My boss before that was for over 30. And,
Wow.
most of the people I interacted with were, 15 plus.
Hmm.
So is a lot of people that were, really enjoyed the space. But so I think maybe there's a bit of an anomaly around that particular company,
Hmm.
but um, I wonder if your experience here, was around technical jobs, and I think people in our space tend to enjoy what they're doing. We're solving cool problems and getting to learn
Hmm.
and have a lot of flexibility. So I think that makes our industry really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that, up until so, and when I lived in North Carolina, I ran a computer. I can't even talk right now. I ran a computer repair company, and uh, just small scale. I had some clients, and then I had a couple of call centers that I dealt with, and I really enjoyed that a lot. Mostly meeting a lot of people and just dealing with hardware and operating systems and that thing, and that really, I guess, was what kind of kept me going in tech, because if I hadn't have dabbled in hardware, I probably wouldn't have even considered programming.
Hmm,
My
interesting.
my brother Micah is a programmer. I don't think he listens to this. But um, I don't know that he programs so much anymore. He's kind of moved, like, you, kind of moved into management, and
Hmm.
but he started off with a pretty small company and just kind of worked his way up. And when I had reached a point where I had a kid and had a lot of family stuff going on, I decided to investigate programming as a way to possibly make more money and maybe do something that I actually enjoyed. But I was terrified of code, because
Hmm.
it I thought that programming was shit tons of math, and I didn't think that. So I didn't get a high school diploma. I got a GED when I was 30, and
Hmm.
math has never been my strong suit. So on the GED, it required, I think, a passing grade of 400 in any subject, and I got college level everything except math, and I literally got 400.
Hmm.
It
Awesome.
was weird, but I got the exact number I needed to pass the math. And so I've always kind of avoided math like the plague.
I think that's the exact thing that happens. I think that's what that's the situation that makes people feel like they're not good at math is I know that I'm going to use a math example in order to explain this,
Yeah.
but it's a little bit like compounding interest,
Uh-huh.
right? Where, let's say in kindergarten, you're trying to do math and you're 90% understood, right?
Mhm.
And on the average is 100. Someone's understands 100, and maybe there's some people that understand a little bit better or whatever. Well, that 90%, and then the next grade, you understand, you know, another 90% of that, but that puts you at like 81%.
Mm. Mhm.
So every time you're falling behind a little bit more and more until the time you get to high school, and it's like, I'm bad at math.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I don't know that that's the case. In fact, my wife falls into that category, and she's never liked math and this and that. And
Mm-hmm.
she's doing, she's about to start her PhD, and literally talking to me about statistics,
Oh wow.
because she's realized that, hey, she's not bad at math. It was just there are some fundamental things that she didn't understand,
Right.
and she had to go back and sort of relearn them, because they don't really have enough time or whatnot, in, I think, standard curriculum. Like, you're
Yeah.
going to spend a week on this, and you're going to spend a week on that, and
Yeah.
if you didn't get it all, too bad. We're moving forward to the next thing, right? So,
Right. Right.
um,
I
yeah,
definitely I
I
see
think
what
it
you're.
creates this problem.
Yeah. I definitely see what you're saying, because I think that, and maybe I was just slower to learn in that area, and like you said, they just kind of move on in classes and things, and you don't,
Hmm.
if you don't grasp it, it's whatever. You just move on to the next subject, or the next grade level. And yeah, that probably creates a sort of stigma, or a feeling of, okay, maybe I'm just not good at this, or maybe, you know I can't learn this.
Yeah, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way,
Hmm.
right? Or
Hmm.
confirmation bias.
Hmm.
Like, you're not good at it, so then you don't pay any attention. So then, of course, you're not going to be good at it going forward either.
Yeah.
I so listening to the last episode, it was interesting, because I had the exact same origin story with coding that Chris had talked about, with
Mm.
wanting to create video games
Yeah.
with, and you mentioned his sister, and I was the same boat. Like, I didn't have enough money to buy my own video games. I was like, well, what if I could make them? And I had like a hand-me-down Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And so I had the same thing that he mentioned. Like, the back of the magazine had, type these codes in, then you can get a game to work. and
Hmm.
and so that was my first introduction into, oh wait, what is this? How do I code and create something? And I never actually got far enough into making my own game, but that's where the interest started.
Mm.
And a little bit full circle was when my son started getting interested in computers. There's a program out there you may have heard of called Scratch.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with it.
And
Hmm.
yeah, so it was created, I think, by MIT, but it was created in order to really introduce coding concepts to kids. And
Yes.
he was able to make games. You put a sprite on, you hit the this arrow, and it moves to the left, and really, but learn things like functions and loops, and conditionals, and things like that, that allowed him to do some pretty interesting things with, even in that limited environment.
Yeah. How old are your? You just have the one kid, or I'm sorry, did you have more?
So I now have 7
Oh,
kids,
okay.
and
That's
the one I'm talking about, he's now in computer science at in college.
okay.
He's 18.
So that
But
comes as
my
no shock to
oldest.
me, by the way. I'm actually number 4 of 7. My
Oh,
my brother Craig had 7 daughters, and my brother Micah had 7 kids. Also, he had a mix of boys and girls. My parents had 7 boys, all boys. I don't know if they just kept trying for a girl and failed, and then my brother Craig kept trying for a boy and failed.
that is, so there's a lot of sevens.
Yeah,
It's like lucky numbers.
pretty nuts. Um, but yeah, so that's
So my
pretty awesome.
oldest is 23, and
Okay.
he completed a boot camp.
Oh, cool.
And so one of the things that I'm doing now is I've been meeting with people. I just put something on Twitter that said, "Hey, if anyone wants to talk, have some mentoring or chat or whatever,
Hmm.
hit me up."
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to talk to, I haven't counted recently, but probably close to 100 people in
Mm.
like 20 different countries. I mean, people from all over the world, and
Oh
it's
wow.
something I feel like I have a calling to do. So
Yeah,
it's been really exciting. But one of the reasons I did it was because, you know, as my son was leaving boot camp, I was, hey, well, do you want to do a mock interview? Do you want to talk to some people? Because I know a bunch of people, right? So I was able to
yeah,
connect him. I didn't like, get him a job or something that would
sure.
be like nepotism,
No,
but
it's whatever.
I did have was able to give him access to people that someone else in his like cohort wouldn't have, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I was thinking, well, that's not fair. So that was really the first inspiration for, let me reach out to other people that don't have someone like me in their life
hmm
and say, hey, if you want to talk, you want me to look at your resume, you want to just
yeah.
pick my brain,
We
hit me up.
we look at my resume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I mean,
I'm sure they
literally
exist.
yesterday I talked to someone and she sent me her resume, and so I've got to get her some feedback. But
That's cool.
interestingly, I sent her the link to your podcast saying you should check this out. So
Oh, that's awesome. You can make her listen
hmm.
to the episode 5 or
Yeah, I thought
good.
Brooklyn's you know feedback around finding your first job, it was really good stuff. So
Yeah, I did too. I thought it was really spot on, um and I had my who was it? It was my I was at my mother-in-law's house, and her boyfriend, he was kind of big into uh I don't know how big he was, but he did a lot of audio and video editing, movies and that kind of thing. And he asked about my podcast, and I was telling him a little bit about it, and he saw that my when I've posted them on Twitter, they're like an hour and a half long, and he's like,
hmm.
"Have you looked at had the listens on that to see if?" I'm like, "No, I haven't really, because I don't really care. It's
Hmm.
um I'm not worried about how many people, or whether they listen to the whole thing or not. If somebody gets something out of one of my podcasts, then great. If not, I got a lot out of my podcast. And you know I, I'm there's going to be there's always going to be some negativity from somewhere, no matter what you do. So as far as I
And I feel like, sorry.
no, go ahead. I was just going to say, as far as I can see, the only thing I'm just going to do is keep doing my thing. And if I'm enjoying it and having fun, and maybe somebody else you know likes what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter if I have 50,000 listeners or I have one.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is that I feel like the best content is created from that place, from the place of, I want to, I I just want to create something, or I want to achieve something for myself,
Hmm.
not necessarily for like financial gain. And some
Right.
some of the people I've talked to said, what do you get out of this? 'Cause I'm not charging anybody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm just doing it because it feels like it's the right thing to do.
Sure.
Over time, I am getting something out of it. Obviously I'm learning from them as
Yeah.
they're learning from me, but also, um, what I find is some patterns start emerging and questions, and how I would, how I'm answering them. It's like, well, why don't I, turn this into an article
Hmm. Hmm.
and write something about it? So that's where most of my things that I've written about have come from, is either
Yeah.
conversations with people that I'm mentoring, or people like at work that I'm having one-on-ones with people, and mentioning things like dog fooding, and they're like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, okay, well, let me explain it. And it's like, instead of explaining it a dozen times, let me maybe write something about it, and then um, help from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, now you got to explain what dog fooding is.
Sure. um, and if you haven't read the book, uh, Pragmatic Programmer,
Yeah. Throw that out there.
I would highly recommend it. It's I used to give it to everyone that joined my teams. And I've consistently had really awesome people on my team, so maybe there's a correlation there.
I'm gonna
But
look at the show
one of
notes.
the yeah, definitely check it out. And they just released an updated version in the last couple of years. It's like the 25th anniversary.
Oh, cool.
Interestingly, one of the writers of it is a big Elixir proponent.
Oh,
So
very nice.
there's that.
That's awesome.
So one of the concepts they talk about is called dog fooding, and I believe it comes from something that like the CEO or someone of like Alpo, actual dog food,
Oh,
talked about, is like he was going to eat his own dog food because it was, to show like he was going to use it himself or test it himself before just like giving it to a dog and never actually having it.
interesting.
And it's funny because you can use a product, like let's say you're using, a time tracking software or something like that.
Yeah.
And if it's like really clunky and it takes you 5 clicks to add some your time in and then hit submit or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you that the coders that were actually building the thing did not use it themselves. So
That
when
makes
you use
sense.
it yourself, you're like, oh, you know what, this button is a little bit weird, or why it would be better if I could do this thing. And you just evolve it in a way that makes for better products. So when one of the things I built at Turner was a system that gave us visibility into where issues were happening with like video playback, and we were the number one users of that product. So when like CNN called and said, is there a problem? Um,
Mm-hmm.
my team was pulling up these dashboards and giving some visibility. And so then when we handed it off to others to use, we knew it worked really well because we weren't building it from a spec and someone saying, hey, why don't we add this feature and add this feature? We were building it from us using it and saying,
Mm.
oh, you know what? This would be really cool. This would be helpful. So,
Mm.
dog fooding is using your product yourself.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, though. That's one of the things. I don't know if you're familiar with Basecamp at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
That started Rails.
I believe that that kind of started as them building something for themselves and then realizing it would make, that other people wanted to try it, and so they put it out there, and that's kind of where that came from. It was an internal tool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a double whammy, right? Because they built Rails to build Basecamp
Hmm.
to track their
Yeah.
track their thing. So they made two products out of one endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, Rails is pretty awesome. I was using or learning that before. That's probably the last thing I was learning, honestly, before I switched to Elixir. I was going through. Are you familiar with Learn Enough?
No.
Okay, so Michael Hartle wrote a book called The Rails Tutorial, and
Hmm.
that is probably the best learning Rails material out there, in my personal opinion, of course. Um, Rails is similar to Elixir in that there's not a whole lot of really good learning material out there. It's that is geared toward beginners. So,
Mm.
um, yeah. So he started writing a book called um, the Rails tutorial, and then that kind of expanded and eventually turned into a platform called Learn Enough. And Learn Enough to be dangerous is the the thing.
Hmm.
So he's got a series of things on there that takes you through learning Git and JavaScript and Ruby and then Rails and a couple other things, I think. And I was doing the Rails tutorial, and that I think that's kind of around the time I bumped into Elixir for the first time. It was last year sometime, and I liked the look of it, and I liked the idea that it was different than object oriented. But the book that I had picked up, which is probably a really good book if you already have been programming for a bunch of years. and would help somebody like that switch to something or switch to Elixir pretty easy. But for me, it was pretty hard to understand, and so I just kind of put it down for a while until I interviewed Brooke. Uh, well, actually, until
Gotcha.
I ran into his podcast. I was just bored one night and decided to just kind of look for a podcast, and I figured, well, I'll see if I can find a good Elixir one. And I ran into his Elixir Newbie podcast, which is pretty good. If you haven't listened to that, that's worth a listen. But
Yeah, it's on my list. I want to check him out. I mean, I definitely was listening to him on your podcast and felt like, man, this guy's a kindred spirit in terms of, um, an interest in helping others
mhm,
learn and, talking about a lot of the same um, concepts and questions that people ask me as they're around, getting their first job and what should I focus on
mhm.
and all of those kind of things. So definitely, it's on my list to check out.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, that's kind of the struggle, is figuring out where to start, or kind of what they should go with, that kind of thing. I struggled with it. I started off with a Udemy course on, I mean, pretty much the same thing everybody else does, full stack.
Hmm.
And JavaScript and I didn't gel too well. I just had a horrible time trying to understand it.
The thing that I really have liked about this Elixir boot camp
Hmm.
is that, well, the thing that I don't like about the other ones that I've seen is they start with like HTML and CSS,
Hmm.
which I kind of get why you want to do that. Well, first of all, most of them are specifically talking about web development.
Yeah.
So therefore that makes sense.
Hmm.
And it also it makes sense from I want to give you something that you can immediately use to create something like today
Hmm.
that you can show your friends and give you that little bit of a
Bump.
motivation boost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing that I think is a little bit surprising to people who don't really know technology and they're going through this and they start learning JavaScript and they're confused
Hmm.
is like JavaScript is like like general purpose programming. I don't want to say real programming and like sound like I'm putting people down because
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, anyone that can do CSS does more than me because I really haven't spent any time there,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you're more adept than I am there. But the, the concepts that you learn when you're learning JavaScript, and and the same with this Elixir class, like data types, and functions and how you organize code and how you do conditions and those kind of things.
Hmm.
Um, that I mean, those are universal in programming.
Yeah.
Right? Things like CSS and divs and those kind of things are very specific to one specific industry and one specific use case. But like
Right.
the things that you will learn around JavaScript will be applicable if you went and started doing iOS development or started whatever doing back end development. All of those concepts are the same, and so I kind of like that this is a boot camp that is not so web dev focused.
Hmm. Yeah, me too.
I think it'll be a lot more useful. Yeah.
I like that it's very heavy on the programming part with the exercises, and I think that's more important than, at least early on, than building a project. I think you have to have both. You have to have lots
Hmm.
and lots of exercises in the beginning to solidify concepts and help you think programmatically. I probably butchered that, but uh, but and then of course, moving on to actually building something with what you've learned. But most courses are very project heavy, and a lot of it just turns into code along. And
Yeah.
no offense to anybody that teaches code along, I think there's a place for it. But if you haven't thoroughly taught somebody how to program, them typing along to whatever, whatever you're doing on screen isn't going to teach them to build projects on their own, in my opinion.
No, and I've learned that teaching is such a skill too, and it's
Hmm.
something that I want to work on and do better at. I'm can do a lot of coding things, but explaining how my brain works around this stuff, like the other day we were pair programming, right?
Hmm.
And I was trying to explain. Someone was asking questions, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain why I did it this way. So, people that are teaching others and have that real skill there
Yeah.
are really really valuable, really precious if you have if you can do it well.
Yeah. I think there's
One thing that
no, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that I think about with you were talking about project based work,
Hmm.
and I think there's a bit of a misconception at times too around like what makes a senior developer versus a junior developer. It's not, you hear, well, I've had 5 years experience or 10 years experience or whatever, right?
Hmm.
What does that mean? That doesn't mean, oh, now you know every um, function in the standard lib for Python or Java or script or whatever, right?
Right.
Oftentimes, I think what that means is you have real experience in the industry that you're talking about. And I don't know that I've heard any people talking about it this way, but one thing I kind of highlight to people is look, if you come to interview on my team, well, my team for the next week,
Hmm.
it is, we'll ask you, sure, we'll ask you to do some sort of like technical assessment. We want to make sure that we think that you know how to code.
Right.
But our job is around video. So I'm going to ask you, have you ever seen HLS before? What do you know about ad tech? Do you know what SSAI is? Do you know, like
Hmm.
these industry specific terms and, problems and protocols or whatever that if I'm hiring a senior, I'm kind of hoping that I find somebody that has that industry information, right?
Right. Right.
And so one thing I think people don't get the right advice on or don't really think about is if you have an idea of what you want to do, and a lot of people don't
Hmm.
really, they just kind of want to get into tech.
Yeah.
But if you had an idea what you want to do, I want to be in game development, I want to do machine learning, I want to do video, I want to do CMS, I want to do ad tech or security. Well, go build your product, your project with something in that field. Because then what'll
Hmm.
happen is when you go apply to a job in the field that you want to be in, and they say, "Do you know what HLS is?" You'll say, "Yeah, I I didn't use it professionally or whatever, but I built this thing, and I
Hmm.
had to use FFmpeg to encode MP4 and turn it into HLS or whatever, right?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've touched a couple of things, even if I'm not saying that people should over sell what their experience level, but the
Yeah.
fact that you've heard of some of these terms will give you a edge when you're trying to interview into some of those roles.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like tailoring your resume to match whatever job you're applying for, which I'm
Hmm.
terrible at, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I think there is some diminishing returns on that. Like
Hmm.
my wife was looking at a bunch of different jobs and like constantly tweaking the resume, and I'm like, I don't know that that's going to move the meter enough.
Yeah.
If it's a 1%, 2% improvement, it's not like doubling the efficacy of my resume by tweaking some words.
Yeah, no, that's
But
that's good that you mentioned that because that's one thing I've never really fully understood. is, changing the resume. The most of the jobs that I've had, I think I may have gotten them because I'm okay at interviewing, mostly because I talk to a lot of
Mm.
people. But I mean, I always look at my resume and I'm like, God, this is dog shit.
I mean, I do understand the idea of like if you're applying, for a role that's data heavy, maybe you want to highlight the things that you've done
Yeah,
data wise.
sure.
And if you're doing a thing that's, also, but I think in order to really do that, you have to have a very big resume where, okay, I've done things for 25 years. Which projects am I going to highlight here? But if you don't
Uh-huh.
have a ton of depth anyway, then I don't know. You're gonna like pick and choose the things that you want to highlight is going to make a huge difference.
Right, right. I've been working for 20
Um,
plus years, but I don't have any depth in a career. uh, the
well, yeah, just from hearing you before, I know that you've bounced around a bunch of different
mhm,
roles.
yeah,
So
definitely.
that's one thing I really actually like when I'm talking to a lot of the people I've talked to in boot camps.
Hmm.
Um, are coming from really interesting backgrounds. People that are, they're former therapists and they want to do something different, or they work with disabled people, and I'm like, you could build something that's so cool, so much different than my experience, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm like a classically trained, I guess you would say, like I went to college right out of high school for computer science,
Hmm.
like computer science all the way, right?
Yeah.
So therefore I don't have any depth in other areas. I don't have,
Right.
other than the things that I've worked on through my job, I don't have like some people that were formerly in healthcare and now they want to be coders. I'm like, you can create some really cool projects because you can bring that
Hmm.
understanding of a different industry and a different world and what problems exist there. Like one of my buddies is in a band. He wants to create some um, projects around the tooling to support the needs that they actually have, and not
Yeah.
like, oh, this is what a band wants. Is like, no, he knows exactly because he's, trying to reach out to his fan base,
Hmm.
so he knows the problems that he's trying to solve. So he can create something that is really effective. Again, this is points back to dog fooding. Like
Right.
if you're the one that you're building for yourself, you're going to make something really good.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, speaking of products that you build for yourself, I've had this idea for a while. I started building it a bit in Android, and I've put it on hold, especially while I worked this Elixir boot camp, because I think it's going to wind up in Elixir. But as probably most of my projects will from here on out, um, it's a reminder app because I have a habit of signing up for free trials of stuff and then forgetting, and then I get charged.
Right. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's an issue. Or sometimes I'll fire up a month of Netflix to binge whatever, Cobra Kai or something, and then again I'll
Right.
forget to cancel it, and I get charged for a second month, and you know they don't have that much interesting stuff on there anymore. So, uh, so I want to build an app that can ping my phone when uh, I've got a subscription or a free trial about to charge me. Maybe eventually.
And I think those are like really cool projects personally. Like I have, so one of the things I want to do
Hmm.
after, I don't have a day job anymore,
Yeah.
is build some of these things that have been bouncing around in my head for a while.
Hmm.
And like one, and usually this is kind of like a functional programming way to think about things. They're small apps that do one thing,
Mm. Hmm.
and I don't need to build a monolithic, like
Yeah.
uh, you know uh, giant project. Is like, I think it would be fun to build something that does one thing really well, and people can use it if they want. Like an example is like over 4th of July weekend, I built this thing that for me, I wanted to track the countries of people that I've talked to,
Oh,
and
cool.
you just go in and say, this country, this country, this country, and it creates an image of a map that has all of the countries highlighted.
Oh, that's really neat.
And you could use it for other reasons, like, hey, where have I visited, or
Sure.
or whatever, like. So I'm not injecting what it means to you. All I'm saying is, give me your list of countries, and I will give you a map that has all of them highlighted. It's just something pretty simple, but it's also something you can like build in a weekend. So
Right.
it was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I would probably use something like that. It'd be kind of neat to see because I mean, I try to talk to people from all over the place. I don't care where they're located. It's been
Hmm.
it's been mostly U.S. and UK, and then uh, um, Africa. But so far that's been it. But oh no, Italy too. So yeah, that would be kind of a neat little project.
Yeah, I just think it's like, but those kind of things, like, who knows? Maybe that'll be a cool thing that gets some traction or whatever, and it doesn't have to. I mean, when we talked about Basecamp, I mean, initially Basecamp wasn't super deep, right? I mean,
Mm-mm.
it was,
No.
to them, it was a side project that they were doing to build
Yeah, they needed.
other more complex problems. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I think they needed it for. They were using it internally for something. Just and then they were just kind of building onto it as they needed features. So it wasn't even a. It was maybe like one or two features when it started, and then um, I don't know how many it's got now. It's a decent sized um platform. I've used it. They have a free thing. I think you can have like three projects on there free, and
Mm.
it's really just project management software.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, I haven't used it in probably 10 years, but I mean, it was simple and easy to use, and I love both of those things.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
what are your okay? So I joined the boot camp, the Elixir boot camp, and then I guess you listened to my podcast and decided to give it a shot.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I was listening, and I felt kind of kindred, like both you and Brooklyn. I was like, this is pretty cool. And then I was thinking, well, I'm going to have some time on my hands, so why not just try to learn something new? So it's been really cool just to get on and talk to people, and I don't have a ton of time yet because
Hmm.
I'm still working, but here, the couple of times I've been able to get on, just to, um, I just really love the community of around um, tech, where people are learning and helping each other and kind.
Yeah.
Generally, they're just like, people are all coming from different areas, and with different backgrounds, different experience levels, and but I don't generally see a lot of ego.
Hmm.
I really like that.
Yeah. I find that kind of refreshing. It's great to be able to just ask questions and not be judged for what you don't know. Uh, it sounds like that's a Stack Overflow problem. But yeah, it's really great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So much so that I decided to pretty much dedicate my entire free time for the whole boot camp, and mostly my job situation being what it is. I wouldn't call it particularly stable at this point. The Which is weird because it it kind of was before, or during during Corona, but I don't know
Hmm.
if companies aren't buying the medical equipment that they were, or what. Um, Things at work have been really really slow. A lot of people are taking unpaid days off, and it just it kind of came at the right time because I'm suddenly finding myself with a lot more free time. and I think it's probably time for me to make a pivot. um, hopefully, it's not another.
Well, I really liked what Brooklyn said in the on the your last show about a lot of people are pushing for JavaScript, React,
Hmm.
and it's true that there's a lot of jobs there,
Yeah,
but you have to also look at what are the number of people applying to those jobs.
yeah,
What is the size of the workforce behind it? Even if it's the most popular thing, if it's also the most flooded area,
right.
that's a problem. I can tell you, last year I hired 10 people.
Hmm.
Um, Three of them were um, more junior level roles,
Yeah.
and we could talk a little bit about sort of the problems of what I see with junior level roles and why it's so hard to get those sometimes
Hmm.
just from like the incentive structure. But
Yeah.
um, the number of people that applied to those junior roles was like 200 plus.
Wow.
The number of people that applied to the other seven, more senior roles and management roles was like five,
Mm.
and most of them not qualified, for those things. So, the junior level, it wasn't just the junior level. It was also that they were, JavaScript heavy
Hmm.
and, more in the sort of web dev stack.
Right.
But that just tells me I mean, there's a lot of people in that space looking for those roles.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, if you had like Roku, BrightScript, that's the language behind Roku, on
Oh.
your resume, like the conversation I generally have with recruiters is, hey, we don't have anything open right now, but if you see anyone's resume that has Roku, let me know because I'll like create a role for that because it's so rare. And Roku is one of the most popular ways to consume digital video.
I mean, it really
I mean, it's
is.
probably number one.
Our TV's a Roku TV, TCL Roku
Hmm.
TV, and yeah, it gets a lot of use. I've got a Roku plugged into my small TV out here in the living room, and yeah, they're great devices. I didn't realize that they use their own programming language though. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the weird catch 22 is everyone has a horror story in the business around Roku because they're a very like proprietary ecosystem,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and so it's kind of difficult to get things done and find people and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, maybe because it's so locked down, or, or I'm not sure why they're winning. Maybe it's just cost,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
the numbers are just through the roof
Right.
in terms of consumption.
Is that kind of
At
reminds me
least
of
at least in the U.S.
that kind of reminds me of Sitecore a little bit. What the CMS that Chris from the last episode uses. It's it's super locked down. You know, you can't learn it unless a company is like, "Here, learn this." It's really weird. There's no training platforms for it at all. I've done, a little digging trying to find stuff just out of curiosity, and there's like nothing. There's no way to learn it. You pretty much, like, maybe if you have WordPress or some other CMS experience, that would help. But there's nothing. There's no site core. There's no way to learn it unless you're at a job that uses it, and they're like, "Here, we need you to learn this," you know, or maybe there's an internal job that you apply for, and they're going to teach it to you. It's
Yeah,
kind of
that's what's
strange.
so counterintuitive. It's like, how are they winning when um, it seems like they're following not best practices, but
Hmm.
um, that was one thing I was thinking when I was listening to that episode too. Was that was sort of how I started my journey. Was I was first building CMSs with a much older system, but it was a proprietary system that no one's ever heard of, and
Hmm.
I had to go to like a training, to learn how to do it, and it wasn't like now where there's most things, yeah, there's tons of getting started and free documentation, because that seems to be the best. That it makes sense. If you want people to use your stuff, you kind of
Yeah, you would,
follow a freemium model, right? At
right.
least for developers.
Yeah, you would think they would provide some way to get training outside of a company that used the product so that they could, have more developers using the products to work on their stuff. It's definitely seems counterintuitive to just kind of hide it all and not let anybody have any kind of access to it. Have you?
Yeah, maybe it's a quality control kind of a thing. So
Yeah, I guess that would make some sense. I don't know. Um, so do you have a lot of Roku, or have you seen a lot of Roku? I guess rather, have you worked with Roku a lot in your business?
yeah, I mean, we again, it's a top platform, and all of our brands, CNN, TBS, TNT, Cartoon, Adult Swim, March Madness, they all have Roku apps.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
um, it's generally a primary concern, and sometimes what happens is when you look at the full viewership
Hmm.
across all the different devices, there's things that are not winning, like Chromecast or something that might have 1 or 2% of the audience,
Yeah.
but that you may want to, you have to make a business decision of, do we want to continue to support some of these that aren't really worth the effort potentially.
Hmm.
But Roku's, I don't know, 30%. It's pretty
That's
high.
pretty huge. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely a a big chunk. So, what's your experience with Elixir been so far? Like, what do you think?
I really like Elixir. I think I was thinking about this as kind of a weird analogy, but
Hmm.
did you watch the new Top Gun movie?
Oh yeah, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So they're were kept talking about how they were going up against fifth generation fighters, right? Like
Hmm.
the newer technology that they couldn't keep up with the planes that they were in, and how they
Yeah.
just had so much better tech that they were going to be destroyed. I feel like Elixir is falls into and I don't know if anyone has defined this. I'm sure someone smarter than me has, and I just don't know the terminology, but like
Mm,
it feels like a next generation language.
mm.
When you look at, I believe, Java, Python, and Ruby were all created in 1990, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Um, and obviously JavaScript would have come a little bit later than that, but the there's languages that are coming up. I'm not sure who all would be in this. I think Clojure is in the same kind of boat as Elixir. Um, I don't know how popular it is anymore. I think Rust is probably in that vein. I'm not sure how you would define Go, but the point is
Yeah.
that there's these next generation languages that provide support or maybe best practices around things that kind of didn't exist in mass, when
Hmm.
some of these other languages were created. Things like the horizontal scaling across multiple devices slash
Yeah.
multiple processors, and things like the immutability that both Clojure and Elixir have. And I wouldn't be surprised if things like Haskell would fall into the same boat. But
Hmm.
immutability is directly trying to solve for most common problems. I think Brooklyn mentioned it as well, that um, state confusion around state and state
Hmm.
changing is like 90% of the problems that we face, right? So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
can make it much more clear when state is changing, when values are mutating, then hopefully you avoid a very large class of problems. So
Mm.
I really liked it so far. I liked kind of the concepts. I'm personally I think in the functional style. I know that some of my team members before have sort of flamed me for some of the crazy anonymous function stuff that I write, and they're like, "You're not allowed to code anymore." I'm like, "Okay."
Oh,
I'll
that's
go back
funny.
to my spreadsheets. But so it aligns with how I like to think about code anyway. So I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. I like how they also are doing. Um, well, I was into Erlang for a minute too, and
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
definitely get the value of the Beam, VM and what it's built on top of. So
Yeah.
and that's another example of how they schedule worked to be so resilient to failure. It is just,
Hmm.
to me, very kind of next generation.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with you, and it's crazy that Erlang came out in 1986. So it's like it's super old in language age. But the
And
fact that
Erlang syntax is so crazy.
yeah, it's nuts. I've looked at it, but even Joe Armstrong said that he really loved Elixir, which I found
Hmm.
was pretty cool. So he liked where it was going, and the fact that it basically builds on what they did. And I think that Erlang fixes or solves a problem that probably exists more now than it did when it came out. I mean, obviously
I agree.
they
I think the telecom systems that it was created for did have a horizontal scaling
Mhm.
situation, but they were probably a bit ahead of their time there, and
Yeah.
now others are sort of catching up with what they were dealing with back then.
Yeah, and it looks like more and more companies are starting to adopt uh, Elixir and the Beam, and uh, I- I'm definitely looking forward to kind of seeing where this goes. I'd love to work with the language and work with any with Elixir projects. So I'm pretty stoked about this whole thing. I've um, to the point where, like I said, I've pretty much kind of went all in and decided to learn it. And um Brooke's been really great, giving me coaching and helping me outside of class time, when I need it and things like that. And some of the other people in there too have been super helpful, given time. And I don't Quentin or Q, he's got a
Yeah, I talked
funny.
to him.
Yeah, yeah. He's pretty cool. I guess he works with Elixir in his day job, and he's been doing a whole lot of coaching and just giving mentoring sessions and coding, teaching coding, which it was pretty fun. Um, but yeah, my experience with this has um, just been phenomenal.
Yeah, the both of those guys are they just come across as so kind.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I want to, I don't know how to monetize this, or I don't know how to turn this into an actual job, but like I really like the idea of helping people. I love what they're doing, and if they can do it, you know, and still put food on the table, that's awesome. And like I just really like the idea of um, surrounding yourself with people like that. Like, how great
Yeah.
is your life going to be if you're surrounded by people who are doing cool stuff and nice about it? And, you got a question, they can help you. They're not
Hmm.
judging you and all that stuff. I mean, that's the kind of people I want to hang out with.
Yeah. Like you don't find too many opportunities like this. I mean, I'm sure, there are in other areas, but there's a lot of people on Twitter, they always shout, "Oh, find a mentor, learn 60 different frameworks and languages and you'll be a programmer." But they want to charge for mentorship and or any kind of thing like that. And I get, some people do turn it into a business. There was a guy I watched on YouTube for a while. I think his name was Andrew something. I think his name was Andrew. He was a he's a programmer. I think he started or he works in C sharp. And I watched a lot of his stuff for a while. And then he decided to do a mentorship program, but he's charging people like $2,000 or $3,000 to mentor them. And I'm
Hmm.
like, if I'm paying 2 or 3 grand, I better get a job out of this. Like
Yeah,
that's
and I don't think they can promise that. I mean, that's pretty
yeah,
tough, and
yeah.
that's one thing that I know. One thing I think I did poorly in my career is I didn't. I was very insular. I have a really good network of people that I know that worked in the same company and people that have
Hmm.
moved around, but I didn't do enough. Uh, blogging or share, interacting with people or networking and those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
I really wish I had because I think it's just such a rich, like, just getting to know you, for instance. And I don't know how you found me, but through Twitter. But
Twitter, yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's just really you get to meet some really amazing people, and I wish I had spent more time there, but I guess I'm spending time now. It's pretty crazy that I have this thing out there. It's still going. Like, hey, hit me up for mentoring. And I talk to maybe 2 people a week. It's not a ton. And
Yeah,
maybe if it got to the point where it was 100 people a week, I'd have to figure out some mechanism to
right.
limit, and hopefully that doesn't mean charging people, because really
Hmm.
who I want to help are people who need help, and they're not the ones
Right.
that can pay, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
it's kind of like
I
the
mean,
tech
that's
conference thing you were talking about last episode. Is like
oh yeah.
it's geared toward people that have thousands of dollars to spend, or their company's going to
Right.
pay, and
Yeah.
specifically not the type of person that we need more representation in our
Hmm.
in our industry. We need people that are coming from different walks of life, that are looking to make a switch. Because when you talk about dog fooding and those kind of things, like, I you need a veteran to build an app that helps veterans. You don't need me to do it because
Right.
I'm not a veteran, right? So,
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah. You
need
don't know
people
the
like that.
right. You wouldn't know the specifics of what a veteran would require or need or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, I really want to keep pushing that. Um, I hope that I can get more people in there, because I think it's just really satisfying when I have a good conversation and people get something out of it.
Yeah. And honestly,
Uh,
that's a huge value. You don't see a whole lot of people doing mentorship, and maybe they and I don't know, maybe they're judging you by your Twitter following because it's not very large at this point.
yeah. Hmm.
And that could be. And I kind of look at your profile if kind of a double take. I'm like, because I think we were interacting on something, and I'm like, that says VP of in Warner Media of something devices, and I was like, really? Okay. Like, but he doesn't have any followers. I
Yeah,
figured
I
you'd
mean,
look.
I think there's a lot of people like me too. There's a lot of people
Yeah,
who haven't invested the time to try to create a public profile because they're
right.
focused on an internal profile.
Sure. Yeah, you're doing your thing, and which I totally get. Um, the only reason I'm building one is hopefully it helps me land a job at some point. No, I actually got on Twitter for the 100 Days of Code. So when I started learning to
Mhm.
program, I'm like, all right. And you can ask my wife. I used to hate Twitter. I was like, I'm never using some app where posting is called tweeting. It's just fucking stupid. You know? And I don't know. Eventually I just caved. I'm like, well, most of the developers are on here, so I'll go network. This will be a good way for me to network and maybe get my name out there a little bit and help me post or program, stay programming regularly. And it did. I think I don't know, I did a couple rounds of 100 Days of Code, and then I've stopped and started maybe 50 other times. I just forget to post all the time. I'm always forgetting.
Yeah.
I'm like, 100 Days of Code, day 20 through 30. Whoops.
Sounds like we should reinvigorate each other on 100 Days of Code. That sounds like a good mutual motivation, unless you're already in one.
Yeah. No, I'm not. That'd be fun. Yeah, I haven't started another round, but I probably should. I need to be posting more about this Elixir stuff for sure. I am getting a little
Hmm.
bit of traction here and there on LinkedIn, which is nice. I even had a recruiter. I mean, I don't know. He reached out, gave me his job postings that he had, and we just kind of chit chat a little bit. But that was actually, I think, the first time a recruiter's actually done that on LinkedIn.
It's awesome.
I have I haven't had very much luck on LinkedIn um, for jobs in my.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way to sort of keep connected with people that you
Hmm.
sort of know in some way. But like, if you're looking for a job, I don't know that it's the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
But I will say with the networking thing, while I never built um, online presence,
Hmm.
some of the more positive inflection points in my career have come from networking more in a traditional sense of like going to meetups.
Mm.
I was very into, well, I wasn't into it, but my job was basically Java um,
Yeah. Okay.
pretty early on. And then I just um, decided I wanted to learn like something new, and I went to a Python meetup, and I was like, "This is the coolest thing ever." And that I think at that point I was like, "I don't want to do Java anymore," because like, um, it's very verbose, and I think it's improved a
It
lot
is.
since then. This was probably like Java 5 or something.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but so that going to those meetups, that's where I learned about Python. I think one of my buddies like, you gotta check out Rails. Someone was showing
Mhm.
me Git, like I think like the year it was invented, like very soon, after it came out, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So, a lot of the times that I was on the forefront of some of the industry movements around like everyone being interested in Rails and being moving to Git overnight. A
Mhm.
lot of that was from networking and hanging out with people smarter than me.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I attended a couple meetups out here in Arkansas, but for me to go to a meetup, I pretty much have to drive 2.5, 3 hours,
Mm,
north or south, and that's just not feasible. Where I live is a pretty small town. I think there's like, I don't know. The sign still says like 13,000 people, but I'm guessing there's probably maybe closer to 20. But
gotcha.
there's just it's really medical field and manufacturing. That's the two things that kind of support this whole town. I work at
Well,
the what's that?
uh, uh, sorry, finish.
Oh yeah, I was just saying. I work in the manufacturing side, but medical equipment.
I see. I was gonna say one of the really cool things that side effect, I guess, of the pandemic was I was in a similar boat. Not I was living in Atlanta at the time, and
Mm,
it wasn't that there weren't meetups, but my field was video. and there were no
Oh.
video related meetups.
Hmm.
And the ones that, if you looked, there was like one in, of course, San Francisco had one, and maybe one in Seattle, and I think a couple of international ones. All of those went to virtual, and a lot of them are still virtual because they realize, hey, why am I limiting myself? And some of them are billed as just virtual now. So, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
um, I've gone to one a couple times called Chicago Codes,
Hmm.
and it's funny because I'm some of the people on the call were in a room at like a makerspace, and I'm like, hey, where are you? And they're describing where I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. And then I'm like, just to be clear, you're in Chicago? They're like, no, we're in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm like, what? So, there's people all over the place like joining, and talking code, and
Yeah.
you know, that's where I started rereading the Pragmatic Programmer book and realizing a lot of the things that have been influential to me and I've been telling people about came from that book, and I didn't really remember it because I read it so long ago.
That just made me think like maybe online meetups are kind of a good way to go for programmers. Like I've never attended one, but I mean, I can't imagine they're a whole lot different than our class our classes
It
with
was very
with
similar. Yeah.
Elixir. Like, you get on and you talk code, and you chit chat, and you just kind of rub elbows with people virtually.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something I need to look into. Maybe I don't know if there's anything out there for Elixir, but maybe if there isn't, I'll just start one.
That would be cool. I would be there if you create one. The main difference I think for a meetup and like the boot camps is the boot camps are you're going to see all the same people over and over, and it'll be like
Hmm.
a deeper thing, but
Yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
with a smaller group of people. Whereas meetups, you're different people in and out. You
Hmm.
might meet them once, you might meet them a few times,
Yeah, yeah.
but but it's just another great way to network and meet people.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's something I'll run past Brooke. He's got another Discord for Elixir newbie.
Cool.
Maybe just scheduling some kind of a, like, I know they do they do something called Hack a Thing. I don't know if you heard of that. It's
No, that's cool.
basically where I guess they try to work on open source projects. Um, I think that's what it is. And so a bunch of them get together like once a week. It's usually on the weekend though, and I can't do weekends. It's hard enough for me to make it to class on Sunday because I work Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, and I do 2 12s Friday night and Saturday night, and then an 8 on Sunday night.
That's
So it's kind
brutal,
of a,
man.
yeah, it is. I mean, the only good thing is, I wind up with most of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and most of Friday off. So that's the good thing. I get to cram in all of my hours on the weekend and just be done. And then I've got all this free time during the week. But yeah, the downside is it usually takes me a good day to recover. And now that I'm trying to, like, usually I have 2 to 3 hours max between the time I get home on Saturday at 11:30 to the time I have to be in bed, for my next shift.
Hmm.
And on Sunday, I take that 3 hours and I go to class,
Oh, wow.
which, I feel like it's going to be worth it in the end. So that's why I'm doing it. I don't, it's boot camps. They always, at least from the sounds of them, they always seem like they're very time intensive. I've looked into them in the past, and they were either never in a time I could attend, or the cost was pretty high.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I would trust the ones that use those ICEs. Are you familiar with that? The ISAs.
No, what is that?
Um, I'm trying to think of that big boot camp that used them. It had gotten in some hot water. It's basically where you go to it for free, and they try to help you get a job, and the first, I don't know, you pay a percentage of your monthly income back to them as, payment for the
Hmm,
boot camp.
I see.
And I think maybe the idea is good, but they were selling those ICEs to debt collectors.
Hmm,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, it was pretty messed up. So I've just kind of, I don't know, the standard boot camps I've kind of avoided, um, mainly for those two reasons. But I don't even know how the Elixir Academy, the Dockyard Academy, is going to work everything on that end. I don't know what their plans are. I just know that an opportunity popped up, and I I decided to dive headlong.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I'm really happy that you reached out to me and you introduced me to that group. I mean, I think it's going to be a very valuable experience. I don't know if this is one of those things that becomes anything professional for me, or
mhm,
it's just a different way to think that
yeah,
it helps your mind like kind of expand, right?
hmm,
So
yeah,
if maybe that's all it is, but again, just surrounding yourself with good people, smart people, I think is a pretty smart way to go.
yeah. I agree. And one thing I think they're doing that is really good is they're open sourcing their all their curriculum. So
Mm-hmm.
even after it's running, anybody's going to be able to download it and go through it. Um, so then it's just the class part. If you wanted to, I guess, pay for that, they'll have some sort of way to do that. Um, but I mean, anybody can go through the content, and you've seen the content. It's obviously still in flux, but it's getting much better.
Yeah, I mean, since I joined only after listening to your episode, I was a week or two behind, and I was able to follow the curriculum and catch up. So I think other people could do the same.
We decided we still had a little more to say, so welcome to part two. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that one thing that I really believe is that if you if if you want to get better at something, you have to really challenge yourself.
Hmm.
I'd spent a while, like I used to coach my son's baseball team, and so one of the things I was trying to learn is how do you do skill development,
Hmm.
the best way. And one of the things that they pointed out, I read this book called The Little Book of Talent,
Oh yeah.
and it talked about, like, let's say you're playing catch with a kid, and they're trying to learn how to catch better, and like if they're catching 100% of the time,
Hmm.
then they're not getting anything out of it.
Mm.
And if they're catching like 0% of the time, they're not getting anything out of it. Like there's a sweet spot, and it's usually like 70-80% success rate. You can't
Oh.
be always successful, because that sort of defines that you are not challenging yourself enough.
Oh wow.
Um, for growth,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
when you ask me to do this, I'm like, that kind of makes me nervous. I've never done that before, but it's like, you know what, that tells me that there's growth there.
Oh, interesting. And I mean, the reason I'm saying it's interesting is A, because it is, and B, that's not something that most people think about, Like, even me, I've struggled really bad with imposter syndrome, and, going through this and realizing that, I don't know everything. And, um, I'm learning a ton, but I've struggled with what I don't know. And
Hmm.
I didn't really give any thought to maybe, you know, it's because I'm actually learning. And if I'm nailing everything out the door, what am I getting out of it? Because, it's something I already know. So the fact that I'm struggling and failing some is okay. It's okay to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, just don't make sure it's not too much, because then that's where frustration comes in,
Sure.
and that's where, like if you went up to try to, I guess in the baseball analogy, bat against like a major league pitcher,
Hmm.
like you're not going to learn anything from it, right? They're
Right.
just going to, want to blow you away. But an example, we talked about my son playing with Scratch when he was a kid. Like he built a game, and then like later he's like built another game, and it was essentially a clone of the first game. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. And then he did it again. I'm like, you're not actually, it's cool. You're making different games and having fun,
Hmm.
but you're not actually like learning new skills, because you're just kind of rinsing and repeating the thing that you already learned.
Right. Right. Which, while there is some value in repetition, there's definitely, you kind of want to stretch your wings. And I think um, Brooklyn called it something to do with uh, being on the edge of learning, of what you know already. I think is sort of
Mm,
how he put it. And
yeah.
just like the exercises, they're slightly on the edge of either being like almost too much, but you know what I mean, like right there on.
Yeah, I guess they say that you want it to be slightly out of reach, and
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
and then you can stretch,
right,
right?
exactly, and then you got to stretch for it. Yeah, that.
I've had interviews before, or I'm interviewing someone. Like literally, this happened to me a long time ago, but interviewing somebody, and they had 10 years of experience doing Java,
Hmm.
and I'm like, okay, they seem pretty stout, right? So then I'm asking them questions, and it was pretty clear that they didn't have 10 years of experience doing Java.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you did, year one, or, I'm looking at the job description, right? Or the resume. I'm like, oh, tell me what you did in this job. Like, well, I was given requirements, and I wrote the unit tests and documentation or whatever they did. I'm like, okay, well, what did you do in the next year? Like, oh, well, I was given requirements and I did unit tests and document. Literally, they did the same thing for 10 years.
Wow.
And I was like, you don't have 10 years of experience. I didn't say this to them, but
Sure.
like
Yeah.
afterwards, my takeaway was that person doesn't have 10 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience 10 times,
10 times. Yeah. Oh.
which is, totally different game, right? They,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
should have stretched, learn new things. And, by the end of 10 years of experience, you should,
Hmm.
be able to recreate that system from scratch. And,
Right. Right. Hmm.
yeah, so that's I'm glad that you allowed me to stretch.
Well, you're welcome. I've done quite a bit of stretching on this thing myself, man. Today was fun. Today was really fun. I got like the first exercise right. I mean, obviously we're doing like a pair programming thing, but I had a lot of input, and I was like, "Yep, I got this." And then the second one, I was like, "I can't figure out what the hell we're doing." But
Hmm.
but then Brooklyn came in and literally walked us through how to break the whole program or the whole problem down into tiny, tiny pieces, and then just solving each one of those pieces, and then how to put it all together at the end. Like, I've never seen that done. In the 4 or 5 years I've been trying to learn how to program, I've never seen that done.
Well, what you're describing that's how I define functional programming.
Yeah.
Is it's not really about the language, and I actually had this conversation with Q
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. Was you can do functional programming with a procedural language. I could do it with Python.
Mm.
You can do, I think, generally you could do procedural like coding with a functional language. It's really like, how do you think about the problem? And one of I think the core tenets of being functional is breaking problems down to very small functions.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you combine those with, all of these different, higher order functions that, take a function as a parameter, right?
Right. Right.
So So what you're describing is not surprising. It sounds like he was walking you through. Here's
Yeah.
really the essence of functional programming
Hmm.
is breaking things down and then reconstituting them.
Yeah. 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 That was pretty cool to see that, because that, like I said, that's not something that I've run into outside of this. I've got 30 plus Udemy courses, and I've done huge chunks of most of them, and you know
Hmm.
nobody walks you through problems like that, and everybody says break it down, but nobody shows you how to break it down. I don't care
Yeah,
what
that's cool.
I don't care what language you're in. Nobody really shows you how to break down a problem to its fine pieces so that you can take each little tiny piece and put it together, and then until you can eventually build out the actual feature or problem.
And the same is true at the project level. I
Hmm.
don't know if you read the Lean Startup, and
I have actually read that book.
so then yeah, I mean, and most people are familiar with the concept that I don't think they coined, but the MVP concept,
Hmm.
and um, the essence of that is the same. Like
Yeah.
break what you're trying to accomplish at a project level down to the simplest piece that you can, it's autonomous, that you can build, and then layer on from there and adjust from there.
Yeah. All right, my man. I'll catch up with you after a little
All
while.
right. Thanks again. Have a great night.
Yeah, man. You too. Have a safe trip.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya. This has been episode 8 of the Citizen Coder Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with Byron, you can hit him up on Twitter, LinkedIn, or his blog. Links are in the show notes. If you like what I'm doing and you want to sponsor the show, you can reach out to me at info@citizencodercast.com or message me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Links for books and everything we mentioned are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and as always, I'll see you next time.